get to introduce the speaker as well. So this morning's speaker followed Spirit from Philadelphia, PA to Virginia Beach, which you may be able to tell by his accent, he's not Southern. He is from Philly. In 1983, to further explore the Casey material, and spent 31 years working with the Casey health products. And many of you may remember seeing him at the Heritage store, that is now Heritage Natural Market, when it was in its old position. But whenever people asked David when he would meet them what he did, kind of what he did for a living, he would never say he was a marketer or he was the manager in the back of the Heritage store, but he would say immediately that he was a glad helper. Let me tell you, this got some unusual responses sometimes, and I said, honey, you might want to tell them what a glad helper is, because the Glad Helpers was the original spiritual prayer group that was started by Edgar Casey and still goes on to this day at the ARE. Many of us in the room actually came to Virginia Beach because of the ARE and Edgar Casey, and he came here as well because of Casey's legacy. And he spent many, many years talking about the physical aspects of the Casey readings, but now he has graduated to talking about his real love, which is the spiritual aspects such as prayer, which are now his focus. He's been a guest on ARE's Reflections radio program. He spoke at the 25th Anniversary Fellowship Conference in Canada, at Edgar Casey's hometown birthday celebration in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, at ARE Camp. He's been a featured speaker for our local chapter of IANS, International Association of Near-Death Studies, because of his own near-death experience that he often talks about. And we recently did a program together in Charlottesville, Virginia, on dreams. So these are the physical facts, but here are some of the hidden aspects of David that you may or may not know from someone who sees him 24/7. He's a writer of spiritual poetry. He is the least secretive person I have ever met, the least Scorpio, if you know astrology, one who will stop and talk to any stranger and tell them the most personal things or start random metaphysical conversations. He sings everywhere, in the grocery store, in parking lots, first thing in the morning, and is the most positive person I have ever met. Someone once actually asked me if he was really like he seems. Or was it just an act? And no, he really is just what he appears. He is the master of reframing of anything negative into something positive and hopeful. And I often joke that if you stepped on his foot, he might say ouch, but then he would thank you for showing him where not to put his foot. So please give a warm fellowship welcome to our speaker and my honey, David Riblet.
Thank you all. Thank you, sweetie, for that wonderful introduction, for this song that is a prayer, and for being an answer to my prayer. So I'm here today speaking on living intentional prayer. That could be read a couple different ways, and there's a lot of different meanings to that. But I'm actually going to go back, inspired in part. Well, I didn't know this was going to be in here, but it's Earth Day today, and Paul Solomon's reading about remembering Earth's beauty and remembering when the first beings came down and were frolicking in this wonderful creation that we have that's called Earth. We can reclaim that, as the reading said. Spiritual prayer to me, actually, to quote the philosopher and Jesuit priest, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, with apologies for any pronunciations there, could have been a little better. He said, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So what is spiritual prayer? When does spiritual prayer start? Do we have to get spiritual first? Well, hey, we're already spiritual. We're spiritual beings. We may have forgotten a little bit what that means. But let's even go back a little further. When did we do our first spiritual prayers? I'm here to say we did our first spiritual prayers before we came in our incarnation this time. And we do them before we come in every incarnation, because when we're there on the other side, and we not only do them for ourselves, but we do them as a group. I'm a firm believer in reincarnation, and I'm a firm believer in pre-birth planning. So what happens is we're coming in. Say I want to come in and have an experience, and I want to have this experience and that experience and this other experience. Well, how do I get it? I don't get it in a vacuum. I don't get it and I'm the only one in a one-person play. I get it with my soul family. So on the other side, before we come in, we are not only spiritual beings as individuals, but we are a spiritual soul group. And that spiritual soul group might say, I want to experience, go back to Casey. And let's talk about Peter Shobe, who some of you may know, who was a wonderful doctor of the Casey products. And I believe on the other side, as the Casey soul family was planning what we were going to come in and do, someone said, we need a holistic Casey doctor. And I believe Peter Shobe's hand shot up and said, I'll do that. And I think that's how it goes. I think we take these roles. I believe that I came in for 31 years to work with the Casey products. Even though at some point I started telling everybody I was a glad helper, and I was glad to do so, although it took a lot of explaining, and I will explain what that means, because that's part of my nuts and bolts way that I actually put spiritual prayer to work and formed who I am now. But without actually having the major parts of our life that we want to get our lessons from, I think that it would all be so random, it wouldn't have the meaning that it really has. We come in here with specific plans, with specific spiritual intentions, to get lessons and share lessons, to be someone's partner, to be someone's son or daughter, to be someone's mother or father, and we switch those roles within our soul family very many times over very many years as we come in and we do our work. So without further ado, this is one of the really hilarious parts to me, and Cheryl and I had a laugh on this before getting here, over the past few days, because I told her I was going to tell this story. So here I am speaking on living intentional spiritual prayer. What was I doing in the first 10 years of the Heritage or so? Because I had kind of an experience that I actually have been living two lives in a way, because the first part of my Heritage experience, I was pretty disconnected. And I was that way intentionally because of an experience I had. And I was walking around Heritage sometimes, and this is what I was singing. And all of you who remember the Doors, okay, there I was singing, "You cannot petition the Lord with prayer." Okay, so, that was who I seemed to be at that time. That was part of my role in what I needed to do. It was so different from how I am now that to me it's almost like a cosmic joke. One of the reasons I can also very easily talk about both our individual intentions when we come in, before we come in, making our plans and what we're going to experience, and our group intentions. And I'll only touch on this briefly because I've spoken here a couple of times on it. But I did have a near-death experience. I had it on May 8th of 1989. And in that near-death experience, I was on the other side. I had not handled things well, and I had decided I didn't want to be on Earth. Earth's a tough, pleasant planet. And I think a lot of us have experienced that in our own ways at our own time. So I suicided. I really didn't want to be on earth. But as I went up, and I went to the other side, and I was still connected, I could see the silver cord. And I could see all this anomalous white shapes. And they were soul family. And they were there as I went up. And they were with me. And I don't have the kind of experience that a lot of people remember. And any of you who have listened to near-death speakers have probably heard a lot of different experiences. But I also got up there and I said, I have work to do. I decided what I'd done, even though I was in such pain, because that's the only reason somebody does something like that. The only way somebody can be so disconnected. I was in such pain, but I realized that I wanted to come back and help people. And so I asked with all my heart to come back and help people. And I couldn't get back here on my own. And then I fused with Soul Family. And I actually became what's called a fused walk-in. Now, if you were to look that up, you wouldn't find it in a book. I don't think, unless somebody's written a book since then with that in it. But what happened is I came back with more of a memory of the Soul Family that we all have before we come in the first time. And I came back fused with that Soul Family. And you know how they say you get to heaven on the arm of the other? A lot of those others are a Soul Family. As you look around in this room, particularly those who have been fellowship members for a very long time, and you've been through a lot of experiences in the fellowship. Those of you who have been here since Paul was here and experienced what it was like when Paul was here leading the church, and experienced the transition, and experienced now a long time that Paul has not been around. You know, it's a soul family. And it's that way for Casey too. I came down here for Casey. I came down here and started working in the Heritage Store, and we made wonderful products, castor oil, herbal tonics, oral care products that were herbal, massage oils, you name it. There were a lot of lives, and I'm going to kind of interweave the fellowship here and also the Casey material, and then I'm going to share a little more of my own journey as I've walked in spiritual prayer. But I'm intentionally doing this because Casey had lives in Atlantis and Lemuria, in Persia, in the time of Christ, a couple lives around the revolutionary time, 1800s. And that soul group came in again and again, and came in at times to do some really important work. Now, how that ties into the Heritage Store, you can take Kevin Tedeschi's book on Persia. Kevin's the CEO of ARE. And there is a half page in that book. And you can read the half page in that book, and darned if it doesn't completely describe what we were doing with the Heritage, including the Heritage Center. It's like we walked right out of the pages of that book in 6000 BC, and there we were doing it again. We'd agreed to come back, and we agreed to do it again. And, so I've been around the Casey Soul family for a very long time. I came back in again this time, and part of the Casey Soul family is the Glad Helpers, which is the spiritual prayer group. And so I stayed pretty shut off for a while, and I stayed shut off because I had an experience with a nuclear family, a wife and 2 kids. We learned when I was in a, shall we say, a light between lives regression that Cheryl took me into on that night, that there was a soul plan that got rearranged then. And there'd been a couple miscarriages that went on that I actually, that was what got me so distraught. But on the other side, that night that I left, the woman who was not yet my wife and those 2 souls agreed on a spiritual contract to come in, and we would be a nuclear family. But it would be for 10 or 11 years. It would be for a short period of time. And then I would start my spiritual journey again. And that's exactly what happened. It's very interesting when you go on your own spiritual journey sometimes. You know, the vibration we are is what attracts the people around us. You know, what we emit, what we put out, that's what brings in who wants to be around us and what we talk about and what we do. So I was working at the Heritage, but I was pretty not metaphysical outwardly at that time. And then I went out to a conference, got in Anaheim, had not slept much the night before because the plane couldn't start because there was a leak in the fuel engine. It's not really a good way to take a long trip. By the time that could have been a second near-death experience. By the time I actually got to Anaheim, I could smell every smell in that convention center. Anaheim's a big convention center. It's probably 20, 30,000 people and booze and you name it. And I walked half an aisle and I was so overwhelmed I didn't know how I was going to do it. And that was my job. I was there for the Casey products to check and see what other products we could put in our catalog. And I came to a Native American booth. And that man took a little time with me, and he could tell I was blown away. And he took me over and he did Reiki on me. And I walked around for about another aisle, I was so grateful. And I walked back and said, is there anything that I can read that will be helpful that's Native American? And he introduced me to two authors called the Garretts that write Cherokee Native American books. And the first book I read was Cherokee Full Circle. And then I read Meditation, Walking in the Wind. I don't quite remember that story part of the title anymore. But it was the beginning of me walking my spiritual path again. Walking your own spiritual path, walking your own prayers, changing your prayers, because we are our prayers. As we put out that vibration, that's what our prayer is, and that's who we are, and that's what we're going to attract. That was not the prayer of the nuclear family I had. And so that was the part, and I think that's why I don't remember my near-death experience, because there was going to be a moment in time where I went another direction and didn't see my kids, and haven't seen them for 11 or 12 years now. But I can tell you from that night in the life between lives, that was part of our spiritual contract with each other. That's what they wanted to experience when they agreed to come back in. They wanted to experience seeming separation, but still having the love of somebody who would support them as they've gotten up through college now. Kind of nice to be able to update that part. They're both doing really well, even though I haven't seen them. So, you know, there it was, and I needed to really change the way I thought. Because, as Casey said, thoughts are things. They're either crimes or miracles, depending on how you apply them. And each thought, act, word, and deed we have, that is what's creating, as another one of Paul's little sayings here. When we talk, my prayers are powerful, my creative consciousness changes things. What I create is. We are creating every jot and tittle of our creation right here. We're being in this room today for me. I asked 5 or 6 months ago to speak on spiritual prayer. Thank you, Bruce, for helping that. It was a prayer I had. Being here today is an answer to a prayer. As I've come here today, I've asked that each and every one of you find something useful for yourself that you can take and use. And that is my sincerest wish for what is going on today. Because nobody can really talk about themselves. Because what it really matters is I share my story, and you all look at your stories. How does my story touch your story in a way that helps you to look at something in your life and change it for the better? When I pray, I tend to pray for the highest good for all. And if I do ask for anything specific, I always ask for something or something better. because I've learned that the great creative forces who know much more about what's going on than I do walking around in my 3D state are going to create it better than I did. So to stay within my journey in hopes that it will help as you look at your journey, there's a woman who went to church here, Elizabeth Merrick, who was a glad helper, part of the spiritual prayer group. I went to her for 6 months for 2 hours every week, once a week. She was a friend of my mom's who went to the Glad Helpers regularly. And I told her everything about my life. She told me that I would tell her everything about my life. And at the end of that 6 months, I was not the same being that when I walked in, because I had gotten out the things that had been the sum total of my thoughts and the reason why I was the way I was. And I was building the foundation. I wasn't going to Glad Helpers yet, but one morning, a Wednesday morning, and I should add there's a prayer group here at the fellowship that meets Tuesdays at 12 that Sarah is involved with. I encourage any of you to be involved with spiritual prayer, any of you to go to a prayer group. The fellowship has this group here. It's a wonderful part of the fellowship, and it's part of the fellowship that's a seed that would be wonderful if it grew in the midst of the fellowship's garden. I finally got moved one morning to go to the Glad Helpers, so I went. I didn't go to the manager's meeting that morning, which I was supposed to go to. I didn't go to the regulatory meeting that I was one of 3 essential people for them to have the meeting. If any of us was out, we couldn't have it. And because we manufactured over-the-counter drugs, and every once in a while we had to have a meeting. Well, I went to Glad Helpers. I had such an experience as we sat there and started by reading this book, which is called Meditation Part 1, that I came back and told the woman that I know in our whole organization that could change things, that I needed to be able to go to this meeting every Wednesday morning. And Tom Johnson, who was the owner of the Heritage at the time, since deceased, had me go to that as part of my job. And what a blessing to be actually able to leave where you work, go and learn how to do spiritual prayer, apply spiritual prayer, and actually grow. My other dearest hope is that by living my life and sharing my story and being who I am, that is an example that there's something there that inspires you in what you do. Because it's been a long journey, and it's actually done. As we've read and learned this stuff, it was Greek to me. Might as well have been. I hadn't done spiritual prayer. Originally, the prayer group was with Casey in 9500 BC. Some members of the original group were with Casey in 9500 BC in Egypt. And so they did spiritual prayer with Casey then. In 1931, when Casey lost the hospital and the university, he was in despair, wondering what he was supposed to do because he lost 2 things that were part of his dreams. And he was told to do the Search for God, and he was told to do the Glad Helpers. And the original 7 members of the Glad Helpers were named in a dream that Casey had. And that's how the group started. So in this book, and the Glad Helpers meet Wednesday at 9:30 at the ARE on the 3rd floor. It is a sacred space where both those who show up that day and those who do this kind of work on the other side, just like in the fellowship at 12 o'clock on Tuesday, those who show up that day and those who are helping from the other side are doing sacred work, holding peace, holding all the fruits of the Spirit, holding good for humanity. And so I spent 10 years walking what was a very different walk from walking around singing, "You cannot petition the Lord with prayer." And I paid attention to every word, thought, act, and deed. And I saw whether it matched what I saw as who I really was, as my highest self. And if it didn't match, as Cheryl said, I'd say thank you. Not thank you that I did something that didn't match, but thank you that I observed something, that I could then change. So if that same type of situation came up again, I would handle it differently. And so I swear by that process, we use dreams, we use meditation, we use angel cards, we use the waking dream as we drive around and see a message on a license plate or somewhere else. We use it all as a feedback system, like a guidance system to let us know whether what we're doing is part of us being on the right path or not. And, I've just told you my individual story. Now let me extend that a little bit of my individual story. I mean, in a half hour, how much can you tell? But I think it's important for anyone to understand as I share this story, how far away I was from being able to use a guidance system that I could grow in grace. Because it was grace that allowed me to come back that day when I was on the other side. It was grace that allowed me to explore in this incarnation still, being in this body with my individual agenda, now an amended individual agenda, and the soul family agenda, that we are all supporting each other as we do. So, as glad helpers, it was really kind of interesting because when I joined, forgive me those who were there at the time, God, were we a dysfunctional group? If we really were. We didn't get along. I mean, here we are coming in to do prayer, and it's like, it was nuts. And so, and every time somebody in the group like that comes in or leaves, the dynamic changes. Well, it was entrenched, and as glad helpers, we had to apply our own work. We really needed to look at every thought and deed and act and word, and we needed to find unity, not division. And so we had a long way to go as a group. And I was there for about 4 years, and then Utah Company bought the Mail Order of Heritage, and I went for a little while, which I've never publicly admitted to them, because they wouldn't have been really pleased that I was going. And so, but then I realized, for my job's sake, to support everything I was doing, including the kids that still had high school and college coming up, I had to stop going. So I did the emergency prayer list from home, where we pray for people who need immediate prayer. And, then I had a blessing. And that blessing was March 23rd of last year, when I was finally let go from the Heritage. Yes! I had completed my service. And all of you who know who have done really critical, essential work, when you complete a service, how good it feels. I actually meditated upstairs and in the Glad Helper room. And I was given a message that you've earned the right to wear the crown. Keep doing the work to keep earning the right. Because you know what? This isn't an on-off switch. You keep doing this kind of work all the time in whatever way you're supposed to do it. And it's each word and each thought and every act and every deed. I can't tell you how many times I have to say thank you for showing me something, because even though I've gotten a lot better, it's an evolving, living, loving process that we go through. So the Glad Helpers now, as I came back in March, oh my God, what a change, what a group. So coherent, so loving, so joyful, really wonderful, really grown towards what we need at this time. And part of Glad Helpers is actually reading, we read on the glands rather than the chakras, because Casey talked about the 7 centers as glands. We also talk about revelations, which is an entirely other topic. But people have taken the book Revelations in so many different ways over the years, in so many ways that were good, and in so many ways that were pretty far removed from its original intention. And as a Glad Helper, there were readings Casey gave on Revelations. There were a number of them. And to me, what it really is, and I could have titled this talk instead of Living Intentional Spiritual Prayer, I could have titled it, The Revelations of Our Spiritual Journeys. And that would be as individuals and as soul groups. So now I'm going to come back to the fellowship, because when I asked what I was supposed to speak on, and I've worked on this all on my consciousness now strongly for a week, and the fellowship just really came in really strongly, and I was told to make it appropriate to the fellowship members. And so here we are, and we're at the fellowship today. What a great blessing. 7 Terms meditation, James Yack's marvelous picture. Sorry, it moved. James Yack's marvelous picture. That one's marvelous too. But, we have such a creative group. And, it's so many different things. It's music, and it's abundance, and it's health, and it's all religions who believe in one source. And it's a unity. And part of my journey of March 23rd was I was given these other words that were single words. My affirmations changed to be, and I still do about 10 minutes or so, but I was given words like trust, which actually, when I found out about being a fused walk-in, I went to another progression that day, and I was brought there not to be told I was a fused walk-in. I was brought in to be told to trust, and to trust the guidance, and to live the way that I was inspired to live. And that's a big lesson. And, any of those fruits of spirit that we live within our bodies and understand what that word means, we grow so much from that. But bringing it back to the fellowship, here we are. And I can say, oh my God. I remember January 1st of just over a year ago. I believe it was a year ago. I don't think it was 2 years ago. Joey Talley came here, and a group of us gathered around after the service. Joey Talley is a really good intuitive. And we talked about the fellowship and where we are and where we could grow, and there were things brought up about maybe expanding the building. And, well, the building hasn't expanded. I believe the consciousness of the fellowship has expanded. And I believe it continues to expand. I've watched Sharon and Susan and Elizabeth teach classes on inner light. I have watched the music continue to thrive. I've watched there be a prayer group that is finding a renewed understanding. And again, and I encourage any of you to come here Tuesday at 12 to be part of that group, or Glad Helpers Wednesday at 9:30 at ARE. I believe that we're here at this time of change, where it seems so much is going on on earth. To me, guess what? I don't see everything that's put out in the news. I see all the light. I see all the light keepers. I see all the good things that are going on. I see the amazing planet that is. I see our group revelations coming together in unity. I trust it. I see that there will be mercy, because there's a lot that's going on, that to heal what's going on, we're going to need to have mercy and grow forward. And I see miracles. And I see each and every one of you. You're a miracle. Thank you. As you walk your walk and you do your work, and as you're an example, you're an inspiration to others. It's not always easy, is it? Don't we have to walk through all the steps? Don't we have some things that are harder than others? But we're miracles. And miracles happen all the time, and we don't even have to understand what they are. Glad Helpers recently, there were 4 of us behind the chairs doing laying on of hands. I always ask, we are asking and thanking with all our heart to increasingly raise our vibration to be channels for the highest good for all concerned, at this and all times for all those who are seeking, as we assume our mantle of our ever-loving and evolving divinity. That is my beginning prayer every day, and that's what I attract. And at Glad Helpers, as we do this, we're just praying for the highest good. We don't know what they need. They may think there's a shoulder going on, or they have some other ailment, but you know what? That's the symptom, it's not the cause. We pray for their highest good. We pray spiritually so that what goes on gets resolved at a spiritual level. It does not have to manifest on the surface. As I stood behind there that day, I was given an image. It was a four-sided figure. And that four-sided figure, as I was praying later on, sitting down, I was given the word dreidel, which ties in with Israel and Independence Day. And I looked up when I got home what a dreidel was, and the definition on Wikipedia of a dreidel is a miracle happened there. You know, I didn't have to know what that miracle was. It didn't have to be with any of the people in the chairs. It didn't have to be with anything our group had just done. But a miracle had happened there, and I saw that last week as well. And I look here, and I see as I look in each and every one of you, a miracle happened there. And I thank you.